Alright, this one ended up being a bit extensive to plan. See, Gambit Part 2 is one of those things that feels simple, but gets complicated as it moves along. And honestly, the beginning act of it raises so many questions that you kind of bolt in into like, okay, this is going places, and I don't know where. Yeah, anyway. So yeah, because like when I first watched this one, seeing the opening act of it's like, what the are they doing with this episode? I mean, like I said earlier, it goes very interesting places. But anyways, enough about that. So what does it actually do? Well, it goes to a lot of stuff about history between the Romulans and Vulcans and the splintering and how the different groups went their own ways and wandered off into deep space, leaving Vulcan, and so on and so forth, and brings up a group of people who are not mentioned before or since, the Debrune, a offshoot of the group that left Vulcan as part of the splintering. Whether or not the Debrune were actually what we would consider to be Romulans is a bit vague. But they were a because like the Debrune did not become what is the Romulan Star Empire in Star Trek. They did something else after leaving Vulcan. It's not entirely clear what, because everything referring to them refers to them as a race that are gone. Because the fact that the Debrune were the ones who had the Stone of Gol and kept its pieces hidden like sacred relics buried in various sites, it's possible that the Debrune were the splinter faction of Romulans who actually, tried using psychic energy as like weapons or something. I don't know. Because one of the things that this goes into is the idea that in the splintering they had the idea of like peace means safety, and that the Vulcan approach toward using psionic abilities is actually rooted in personal safety and security. Because, if you focus all of your stats into defense, other people can't hurt you with psionic attacks. That's the basic gist of it. So, if the idea here is that the Debrune were the ones who preferred offensive psionic abilities and found out the hard, and by hard I mean painful, and potentially deadly, way that, if you put your psionic aptitude points into offense, you end up being vulnerable to counterattacks, I guess. Maybe that's the idea. It's very, very vague who the Debrune actually are. It does, however, have interesting hints that they're the ones who had the Stone of Gol. Anyways, moving on. So, places associated with the Debrune. Paratus 3. This is actually the only place where they actually explicitly state that they found Debrune stuff, and that the Debrune lived here in the 4th century. There are several other planets nearby that also get mentioned as part of this archaeological expedition. What the heck did Debrune have to do with the Sakethan is also, we don't know, quite frankly. We genuinely have no idea who the heck the Sakethan are at all. The Debrune, we know something about. They're an ancient offshoot of the Vulcans, left Vulcan at the time of this sundering, and that was a long time ago. It's not much, but it's something. The Sakethan, we don't know anything. Now, one thing to remember is that there is the possibility that some of these planets may have actually had an indigenous population before the Debrune showed up. So maybe the Sakethan were an indigenous group that the Debrune lived with in some way. I mean, because the Bryn were a warp-capable civilization, obviously, so, you know, advanced technology on a planet that doesn't have it already? I don't know. Maybe they took over the planet? We genuinely don't know. Because, like, I'll get back to the Sakethan later. Anyway, though, yeah, like I said, these are all places associated with the archaeological expedition to find the Stone of Gol, and they actually found stuff related to that here, so the question is more, what did the Debrune do with these places than whether or not the Debrune were there. Like, because like I said, only one of these places is identified as some place that actually had Debrune living on it. The others, we don't really know. Anyway, so back to the Sakethan. Burial mounds that have glyph stones in it, and yeah, did I mention that earlier that we don't really know much about them? Yeah, about that. Oh yeah, also, it's entirely possible that Picard made the whole thing up. Yeah, I didn't mention that earlier. It's possible that Picard made up the whole thing. We don't really know. One of those things that is just like a one-off line. It's like, oh yeah, I've been there before. I was smuggling Sakethan glyph stones out of it. Do the people listening have any way of verifying whether he's telling the truth or not? We don't know. So, you know, is it an obvious lie to someone who actually knows what the Sakethan are? Maybe. But we don't even know if the Sakethan are real. So, you know. Anyways, yeah, so use that as you will. This is one of those things that's actually fun in episodes like this, though. And when you're writing a mission with this kind of a theme, is that putting in things that are actually just bullshit, that don't actually have, from an in-universe perspective, factual basis, is actually something that adds a little bit of spice to it. Anyways, moving on. So, I mentioned the Stone of Gol itself. Ancient psionic resonator weapon, which, as I mentioned before, if the target of the weapon does mental focusing to take a defensive stance, it doesn't work. One thing that occurs to me about this, though, is that this psionic resonation technology is actually incredibly powerful, and why the hell are you destroying it? Why not, you know, study it and find a better use for it? No, no one wants to do that. Actually, my thoughts on this, though, were that the Vulcans, when they told Picard that they were going to destroy it, what they really meant is that they were going to do tests on it until it eventually was no longer intact. They were going to study it a piece at a time until it was in a whole bunch of tiny pieces and didn't work anymore. Anyways, as we see, though, the psionic resonator is actually highly deadly. Yeah, nasty stuff. Dang it. Never mind. I'm not going to do that now. And there's actually one thing about this that's interesting is that I actually had made a mod for a video game to add the Stone of Gol as an item in the game, and I actually added a secondary function where it lets you create psionic shielding, because that was a key aspect of the weird carvings that you see on the thing, is that the the people using it knew that it had a use in a peaceful context. It's just that T'Pol doesn't know what that is. Focus and amplifies telepathic energy, and T'Pol barely understands that it exists, doesn't really understand how to use it properly, and yes, it is an extremely dangerous item, but, it's not dangerous on the level of, bombarding a planet from orbit. Oh yeah, this is it. Minister Sakethan V. Shar took custody of the resonator and assured Picard that it would be destroyed. Did he say when? No. Anyways, moving on. So, yes, there are two different pages for the psionic resonator. Why? One of them is more like the concept of a psionic resonator, and one of them is specifically the Stone of Gol, which is a single specific resonator. Granted, it's the only one we ever actually see, but, anyways, in theory, there could be more. Because, one of the things with the backstory of the Stone of Gol is that it wasn't actually the only one. Back, when it was created, there was more than one of them. That's an interesting thought. It dates from the same time period as Katric arc technology. What the heck does the Stone of Gol have in terms of a connection to Katric arcs? Wiki-hill. Yeah, I don't have an answer to that. Anyway, so now we move on to the people seen in this episode. Tallera. One of the more interesting characters, because this is a case of a Vulcan pretending to be a Romulan. Yeah. A Vulcan by the name of T'Pol disguised herself as a Romulan. There's a long-standing question in the Star Trek fandom as to whether or not Vulcans ever naturally have those forehead ridges. It's entirely possible that T'Pol did. Okay? We don't really know for sure, though. I mean, maybe she had surgical modification to look like a Romulan. Maybe not. Maybe she was just born that way. Because, again, Vulcans and Romulans just don't actually have significant differences in appearance. The forehead ridges, which not all Romulans have, are one of the few that people used in TNG. Thing is, in TNG, we saw Vulcans so rarely that they were almost non-existent. This is actually one of the biggest appearances of Vulcans in TNG. Anyways, continuing on. This is an example of a crack in the Federation's utopianism, where you find out that the Vulcans, which are one of the 4 founding members of the United Federation of Planets, there's a group of Vulcans who actually don't like the fact that Vulcans are a member of the Federation at all, and think that the Vulcans were better off alone, and not as a member of the Federation. Basically, the idea here is that, it's kind of a religious purity thing, honestly. Why exactly, it's actually kind of also left kind of in a weird place, because you have the idea of that T'Pol actually thinks that her use of the psionic resonator is somehow going to make things better. Realistically, I think that T'Pol's plan would have resulted in a second sundering if she'd actually not been stopped the way she was. Because, quite frankly, the majority of Vulcans would probably prefer to remain members of the United Federation of Planets. Anyways. Which Vulcans? Yeah, the Vulcan security personnel. Yeah. They kind of show up at the end of it because, someone has to be given custody of the psionic resonator weapon, so it ends up being these guys. I think this is the only member of the group we actually see. Yeah, he assures that Jean-Luc Picard that all of the pieces of the Stone of Gol would be destroyed. He doesn't tell him when. What year? I don't know. But eventually it will be destroyed, though. Eventually. Anyways. Now, this is some place that gets brought up for the first time in TNG, but later gets reused in the Enterprise prequel stuff, because this is a location on Vulcan where they did weird psionic rituals way back in the day. And it kind of got left as a disused monument to the past where people don't do that anymore. But they're not going to blow it up because it's, you know, an important cultural something or other. Yeah, this is goes back with the whole thing of like how Kelvin Timeline Spock uh, makes weird philosophical ponderings about just how much stuff was lost when Vulcan was destroyed. Well, here, this is one thing that got destroyed. Oh yeah, also in Enterprise, this is where they have all that stuff with Katric arcs. Again, like I said, old school Vulcans around the time of the Sundering were big onto psionic meditation and studying how to use their psionic abilities. We are somewhat lacking in an understanding of what exactly they did with those. Anyways, now for the people in the episode. Random member of the Enterprise crew, because Data ends up in command of the Enterprise again, and so we have to have someone else doing the helm. I mean, it's nice having extra crew people. Weird alien of the week. I mean, this guy's an Iridian. Obviously, Iridians are in several episodes. This guy gets to be the guy who is the lone informant that the Enterprise crew is able to extract information from in order to figure out what the heck happened to Captain Picard. That's basically all he does. It's like he's an interstellar criminal wanted by both the Federation and the Klingon Empire, possibly other organizations. The way that Riker is able to get him to talk is by threatening to hand him over to the Klingon Empire, who would, I don't know, probably like maybe send him to do the dilithium mining on a frozen moon somewhere. Who knows? Let's see here. Oh yeah, neural servos. That's kind of a major recurring thing here, is that the mercenaries working for Arctus Baran have these things implanted in them as a way of ensuring that they won't backstab Arctus Baran. Well, Picard manages to figure out how to sabotage the neural servos so that as soon as Arctus Baran tries to kill him, it actually backfires and kills Arctus Baran instead. Yeah, that was a stupid idea, but hey, whatever. The concept of the neural servo is actually something that pops up in multiple episodes, so this isn't actually a unique thing to this episode. The part about this that's unique is having it as a implant, where it's like permanently like a cybernetic implant thing where it doesn't actually, you know, do much until someone turns it on. And Arctus Baran. No one actually knows what race this guy is. Never gets mentioned up. There's been some speculation because there's certain other characters in various episodes that kind of resemble him, but we don't know. He's an independent agent who... See, one thing that someone brought up to me in a discussion about this episode in the past is that there's several races that get mentioned where we don't know what they look like, so maybe he's one of those guys. Maybe. But anyways, Arctus Baran is someone who is not affiliated with any of the major galactic powers and is someone who lives in border regions dealing with independent contractor type people. And that brings up something that's interesting about this that I'll get to later, because Arctus Baran deals in a lot of things that are considered to be exotic technology by Federation standards. Not things that the Federation is unfamiliar with. They're not things the Federation's never seen before, but they're things that the Federation doesn't use, and things that are not normal to be seen in Federation space, like the neural servo. Like the Federation, they know what they are, they've seen them before, they know how they work, but the Federation doesn't use them. Now, let's see here. Yeah, this is the other thing I was getting at. Baran's ship is actually some pretty impressive hardware. They don't like have a proper fight to the death with the thing, but there's several things they do note about it. One of them is that it actually has weapons that are capable of doing significant damage to a Galaxy-class ship. Its defensive stuff is also pretty hefty, but a Galaxy-class ship would probably beat it in a 1v1. There is, however, one thing about this ship that it is highly noteworthy, though. It has a passive stealth effect. Oh, this page doesn't mention that. That's weird. Well, this page also doesn't mention how much its firepower is. Anyway, well, here, let's go take care of that. So, energy sheath, which somehow does not have a page. Disappointing. Highly, highly disappointing. The energy sheath is the most interesting thing about this because of the fact that it makes it so that the Enterprise can only shoot at this thing while they have it in visual sensor range. They cannot directly detect and track the location of this ship. I'm disappointed in the thoroughness of this article. I don't say that often. Okay, the way that the energy sheath works is it's a special sort of coating on the hull. It's basically like stealth paint, because it's a feature of the actual hull itself. It's made out of a material that just makes it so that long-range sensors just don't work on it properly. There's nothing else about the ship that's actually particularly interesting. Well, there is one other thing. Just one. The method by which they use to abduct Picard. See, the ship transporters have a targeting mechanism that allows them to be targeted using a energy pistol. So you can take a specially calibrated pistol, shoot someone with the pistol as a way of targeting them with the ship's transporters. Now, this is something that's not the normal way people use transporter technology, but it does logically make sense from an in-universe perspective. It's just, again, that's what I was saying about these guys using exotic technology that's not completely alien. It's just a little bit off the side of what people consider normal. Anyway, so back to the crew. Have a variety of humanoids working for Baran. Some of them are also unknown races because, we have this person named Vicor who ends up getting killed by Tallera, but whatever. She looks a lot like a Claystron. A lot like a Claystron. They never actually say what race she is, though. Oh, yeah. Also, there's another thing that's interesting about this is the insinuation that Arctus Baran's crew, he carefully chooses people that he thinks will be unprincipled enough and mercenary enough to actually put up with being his servants, but he kind of shanghaied most of his crew, which is part of why he uses neural servos. Is that he can use that as a threat of like, yeah, if you betray me, I'll kill you. And including this guy. Yeah, we don't have much of a history on this guy, but as Klingons go, he's one, extremely tall, incredibly intimidating, highly effective apparently, because he actually managed to solo mission retrieving one of the pieces of the Stone of Gol. Yeah, that's an interesting side note. Picard and Riker steal it from him and leave him in custody on the Enterprise. That was kind of funny. Like, it just seems like, oh, you went to try to be nice to me by giving me blood wine to drink, hoping that it'll loosen my lips. Nah. It just like dumps it on the ground. Like, no, I'm not talking to you. I will not accept your offer of blood wine, in fact. I will dump it on the carpet. I have to say, this is one of the Klingon characters that actually made it interesting, even though he's only in there for a few minutes. And you have this guy, who is allegedly a Boslek. Now, I've mentioned Bosliks previously because Bosliks are in several episodes. Most of the time, they don't look like that. Most of the time, they look like this. Although, there's also this. So, yeah, there's a range of variation in Boslik appearances that is, weird. Of course, you know, there's the whole, like, aliens with, like, alien concepts of normalcy. So it's entirely possible that these are all actually people who are the same species. And just that species happens to have an interesting degree of variability in terms of their appearances. Who knows? But anyways, the Bosliks are a group that has been established in multiple episodes as being a minor galactic power that isn't directly associated with any of the major powers. All right, so that is a lot of stuff going over all of the stuff that's here. Now to get to the part of like actually like what would you actually do with this? Like one, this is a huge investigation heavy episode, like huge in terms of investigation heavy. Like, and there's like two different layers of investigation. It's like there's Arctus Baran's quest for the Stone of Gol, which I'm genuinely not certain whether it's actually Arctus Baran who wants the Stone of Gol, or if that was actually Tallera's idea that she talked him into and was planning on like backstabbing him after she figures out how to acquire the Stone of Gol. Yeah, don't know that answer. That's something that is a thing that you might want to examine if you were going to write a story related to this. Because like, okay, the basic idea of looking for an ancient weapon that is from a forgotten bygone age, that is such an old trope that it's a classic. One of those things where it's like, yeah, you can make up your own reasons for why this happened, and maybe people will actually like it. Like, the idea that this is like a psionic technology that the Vulcans developed somewhere around the time of the Sundering, that's a cool concept. Really was. Also adds a little bit of depth to the whole like Vulcan-Romulan split and all that great stuff. And and then there's the whole like thing is like Picard got abducted to be part of Arctus Baran's crew, and now you have to go find Picard. There are several things about this that I personally would find to be interesting, though. It's like having the players impersonate mercenaries. Okay, sure, simple concept. Having them be mercenaries who are hunting down Arctus Baran. Oh, that I think would be more interesting. See, because like in the episode as aired, while the crew of the Enterprise are on what is referred to as detached duty, so they're basically just, you guys go take care of that in whatever method you feel is best, and let us know how that turns out. Okay. Well, as being on detached duty, they're kind of sort of acting like mercenaries in a lot of ways. They're just, not dressing like mercenaries for the most part. And they're not flying a mercenary ship. They're flying the Enterprise D. Yeah, people are going to notice. Like, oh, Starfleet's here. They don't have some minor race ship that kind of sort of looks like it's an actual mercenary ship. Nope, nope, nope. But anyway, though, yeah, in addition to the other stuff I mentioned earlier, if you wanted to have your players actually pretend to be mercenaries and do the investigation that way, that would add an interesting wrinkle to it, because, like I mentioned before, Riker at some point starts pretending to be a mercenary. Anyway, though, only Riker and Picard do that. Everyone else just stays on the ship like normal. Anyway, though, this is long, and there's a whole bunch of fun stuff in this bin of stuff. And I would say this is something that has a lot of plot hooks that you could use in completely different ways. Like, what the heck is up with the Debrune civilization? We don't really know much about them because no other episode ever mentions them. Seriously. Now, the idea that the Debrune were just, one of several splinter factions created during the Sundering, and that the Vulcans and the Romulans were the two main factions that resulted as a matter of the Sundering, that's something that I find to be the most compelling idea. The question is, of course, okay, so that's the starting point. Where are we going to take that in the end? So many things you can do with that. Alrighty then. See you guys later.